Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Drury. You're very welcome.
Thank you.
In the written opening statement that you provided to the committee, under the line of inquiry for the committee, appropriateness of the relationships between government, the Oireachtas, the banking sector and the property sector, you wrote, "This is not something I believe I'm equipped to answer." Why did you write that?
Because I felt that the issue is one which covers a very wide span. I was being asked by this committee, by the banking inquiry, to give my perspectives as a non-executive director of Anglo-Irish Bank. I may have views on how our country is governed, how our economy is managed, how banks are regulated, how different institutions of the state interact with government and interact with the Oireachtas. But those are views which I did not believe were particularly relevant to the specific role that I had as a director of non-executive director of Anglo-Irish Bank. And my sense is that if my involvement as a director of Anglo-Irish Bank is what people want to inquire of me, then I'm happy to give whatever insights I can. But to give a thesis, if you like, on the broader question that was raised in the documents that I received from the inquiry, I felt it was better to just say I'm not really equipped to answer that.
Okay, well, just on that then, in relation to your role as a non-executive director of Anglo-Irish Bank from 2004 to 2008, in that role, did you establish contacts between the bank and the government?
No. I mean, one of the things that was interesting about Anglo-Irish Bank as an organisation, and I had worked previously with the bank as a consultant in the 90s, prior to selling my communications company in 1999. I had quite an extensive involvement with the bank, part of which was to try and work with the senior management to transition, if you like, the bank from its positioning in the marketplace at that time to being recognised as being more established, more substantive, and one of the interesting things about that, Deputy, was that there was a very significant resistance at the top level of the bank then, and that was still there when I became a member of the board in 2002, to engaging with politics, to engaging with government, to engaging. It was almost anathema to the senior people in the bank.
Are you saying that when you were a non-executive director of Anglo-Irish Bank, you never made a contact with the Minister for Finance or the Taoiseach on behalf of the bank?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. How do you explain then the phone call that you organised between?
Oh, sorry. I beg your pardon. I thought you. I assumed, given that I'd given a clear account of that you were asking, beyond that.
No. I'm asking why in your written statement.
Sorry. I beg your pardon. I've acknowledged.
In your written statement, you said you believed you were not equipped to answer on the appropriateness of relationships between the government and the banking sector. And when I asked you to elaborate on that, you said that you were here to account for your role as a non-executive director of Anglo, and that didn't pertain to that line of inquiry. And then I asked you, if as a non-executive director, did you make contacts on behalf of the bank with the government? To which you then, I think, said in a longer answer that you did not, but in fact you did.
Yeah, but with respect, I mean, I absolutely accept that.
Yeah, well, I want to clarify that because...
Hello, Mr. Drury.
Yeah, okay.
But I had... It wasn't as if I wasn't alluding to that or never made that clear. I've made that clear in my opening statement this morning.
It's just that it wasn't acknowledged in the written statement that you supplied, and I was wondering why. And you've tried to explain that. Well, can I just ask you then to clarify? Sure. The contacts that you laid out to us in your opening statement, are they the only contacts that you made on behalf of the bank with a member of government?
As far as I can recall, yes, absolutely.
Do you recall a board meeting in early 2008 at which the possibility of the NTMA placing further deposits with the bank was discussed?
Well, if you wish me to deal with that,
I'm talking about an article from the Irish Independent, which discussed or which details a board meeting that was held in early 2008, at which the placing of deposits by the NTMA with the bank was discussed.
Well, the position in respect of this, with respect...
Sorry, Mr. Drury, are you familiar with the article?
I'm not familiar with the article, but I'm familiar with the source for the article, so I'm happy to deal with the question if that...
Okay, once you remain within the lines of inquiry and remain...
Well, pretty directly, the article is based on information which the source of that for that article. Everyone in this room knows what the source of that article is.
I don't know the source of that article. No. This is an article provided by the legal team this morning, Chair. It's from The Independent. It's entitled "The Political Context That Led to Controversy."
The date is?
2014, I think.
I never discussed at any board meeting making contact with either an individual, i.e. Brian Cowan as Minister for Finance, or the Department of Finance in respect of any issue regarding Anglo-Irish Bank. I never would have allowed any discussion arise at a board meeting of Anglo-Irish Bank or Paddy Power for that instance, where there could potentially have been a conflict between my role as a board member and my relationship with Brian Cowan.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll move on to the Heritage Dinner, if we may.
Sure.
Just to clarify some things around that, you arranged the dinner, is that correct?
Well, as I explained in my opening statement, Deputy, it fell to me to see whether Brian Cowan would be prepared to attend what initially was going to be a lunch in the manner in which other public servants and senior political figures had over the 10 years or so, as I've explained in my statement. And because I was known to be a friend of his, I approached him and asked him if he would do it. It was then the organisation of the dinner would have been managed by other people within the bank.
Okay. Do you see a possible conflict of interest in using your friendship with the Taoiseach or the then Minister for Finance to set up these types of contacts, to set up these dinners?
Well, you're referring to these type of contacts?
Well, sorry, this dinner in particular.
Absolutely not.
Okay. And you attended the dinner with Mr. Cowan, and how long did it last for? Do you remember?
I think about 90 minutes.
90 minutes, okay. And do you recall any formal presentations or documents?
There was none.
Do you recall if Mr. Cowan arrived with a document?
I arrived with Mr. Cowan. He did not arrive with any document.
And he didn't leave with any documents?
And he didn't leave with any document.
Okay.
Because I left with...
And do you recall at the dinner any discussions around funding problems for Anglo?
Absolutely not. I mean, I can recall other things from the... I would recall it if such a discussion happened.
No discussions around the NTMA?
Absolutely. But there was no general discussion about the NTMA, if you follow me.
Okay. Moving on to the other occasion then, the Drury's Glen outing. That was it lunch, golf, and then dinner? Is that correct? How long?
It was a meeting over coffee, and then three of us went to play golf, and then the five of us had dinner. We were joined by Brian Cowan's driver.
Okay. So, how long of a total engagement are we talking about in terms of the interaction between Mr. Cowan and the representatives from Anglo-Irish Bank?
Well, first of all, they weren't representatives of Anglo-Irish Bank. So let's be clear that Gary McGann was Chief Executive of Smurfit Kappa.
Yeah.
Sean Fitzpatrick was Chairman of Anglo-Irish Bank. Fintan Drury was a former Director of Anglo-Irish Bank, not at that time. And Alan Gray was Director of the Central Bank. And they were selected for that discussion on the basis that prior to going on holidays, I had a discussion with Brian Cowan about the value of having a number of smart people around a table to discuss with him some of the more substantive economic issues that, and not just economic issues, but primarily economic issues that were facing the country at the time, and which he, as Taoiseach, might need to get some outside perspectives on. And Brian Cowan was pretty concerned that there would be any misunderstanding by anybody who would be approached and asked to be involved in such an exercise, that he was in some way creating a kitchen cabinet. This was a kind of one-off discussion to explore areas that outside people might be able to give him guidance on. And the reason the people who were at that event were chosen was because it was a combination of people I knew and people that who Brian knew. Brian had great belief in Alan Gray, as many people in politics and in the civil service do. So he wanted him there. I knew Alan, but not well. He wanted Gary McGann there because, as I referred to in my opening statement, he had a view that Gary was very smart, very committed to public service. He was, I think at the time, a former chairman, if not still chairman of the Dublin Airport Authority, and had committed himself to a number of roles in public service. But he was also chief executive of one of Ireland's largest companies, which had a global reach. And Sean Fitzpatrick was my suggestion, and the suggestion was made at a time when Sean Fitzpatrick was deified. It's an exaggeration, but his reputation was both globally and in Ireland extremely high, and he was seen as somebody who was extremely bright, extremely talented, and would have therefore value to add. And it was done on that basis.
At any point was Anglo-Irish Bank discussed?
No.
At any point was liquidity or solvency issues in the banking sector discussed?
No. Actually, interestingly, the agenda which Alan prepared and brought with him when we gathered had, to my memory, no reference to the kind of issues which dominated subsequently, if you follow me, like the ones you've referenced.
You were there to discuss the economy and what was happening globally,
Yeah.
Is that correct? And at no point the banking problems that had already begun in 2007 came up. Northern Rock, Bear Stearns.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that there was no discussion about the fact that there was a very significant global, the start of, well, more than the start, the emerging economic difficulties, which were partly being fueled by significant financial difficulties. I'm not saying that wasn't the backdrop, if you like, but what I'm saying to you is to be clear, Deputy, what I'm saying to you is that at no point was there any discussion whatsoever about Anglo-Irish Bank. And the question I posed in my opening statement was to say, well, why would there have been? Because at that time, Anglo-Irish Bank was under pressure on their two headings, as I saw it, as somebody who had retired from the board 6 weeks previously. And the two pressure points were liquidity and CFD in the Sean Quinn CFD issue. But there wasn't concerns about the solvency or anything like that with regard to the bank.
Okay. Any discussion of the NTMA?
No.
And does the agenda for the meeting?
But sorry, I want to be clear. I should be more precise.
Yeah.
Not that I recall. I want to be definite where I can be. I'm just slightly hesitant to say no with that degree of clarity.
Does the agenda for the meeting still exist?
Pardon?
The agenda that you said, I think Mr. Gray drew up.
Well, I'm sure it does. I mean, Alan had prepared it, so
Okay. Well,
it would be wrong for me to.
Yeah. And at no point, just to be clear on what you understand, Mr. Drury, at no point did you leave any of the individuals alone for a long period of time, or any period of time at all, at which to have a side conversation?
I'm not really a golfer, but I hacked my way around. So Brian's talent in that area is limited as well. So I think the chances of the three of us on the golf course being anyway proximate to each other was limited. Okay. I don't mean to be smart, but no.
Before and
no
after.
Time. No.
Any moment where someone said, "I'd like to speak to you for a moment. Have you got 10 minutes?" And
Deputy, I can only speak for myself, and in that respect, it's a bit like the question you asked me about the NTMA at the dinner in Heritage House, and you asked me, was the NTMA discussed at the dinner in Heritage House? No, it wasn't. Was there a discussion between two parties or two people who were at that dinner about the NTMA? I can't answer that. It would be wrong of me to. I can say that Fintan Drury didn't have any discussion at that dinner about the NTMA, and equally, I can say with complete certainty that at no time over the course of the Druids Glen affair did we have a discussion about Anglo-Irish Bank. However, Did I go out to take a phone call? Did somebody leave the company at one stage? Well, I know people did, clearly. So whether there was or not, I don't know. I very, very much doubt it.
But just to be clear, the purpose of the day itself was not to allow those types of informal contacts to happen.
Oh, no.
Unbeknownst to you.
No, and what I've tried to, and I said in my opening statement, I recognise, as a sometimes sceptic, that people go, well, look at everything that happened, and look at the people who were there, and how could they not have, kind of thing. But I would reiterate that if the purpose was to somehow bring an agenda in respect of this bank to the attention of the then Minister for Finance, in July 2008, the Taoiseach, I had privileged access to Brian Cowan because of our friendship. And if it was a case of me wanting to, on behalf of the bank, influence Brian Cowan, either during his time as Minister for Finance or his time as Taoiseach, to take a particular view on Anglo-Irish Bank, I could have gone to see him, walked into his office. I don't mean that. And closed the door and had that conversation.
I take that point.
Yeah.
Did you have a special access pass to government buildings?
No. I didn't have that level of special access.
You didn't have? No. Okay. Just then, one of the final areas I want to look at in this area of questioning is the phone call around St. Patrick's Day in 2008. Yeah. Is it your understanding that Mr. Cowan did or did not speak to Mr. Fitzpatrick following your intervention?
I would be 90% sure that he did.
He did.
And that was, I don't know definitively, but my recollection is that he would have called him, and maybe he asked me to get Sean Fitzpatrick to call him. I don't know. I think unlikely, but the purpose of the call was to say that he had spoken with the Governor of the Central Bank, and the Governor of the Central Bank was dealing with the issue.
Okay, and did you speak to either of the participants in the phone call?
Did I?
Yeah, afterwards, after they had that chat. Did Sean Fitzpatrick call you back to say thanks for arranging that?
Yeah, he could.
By the way, he said X.
I would be surprised if he hadn't. It would have been somewhat discourteous if he hadn't. But it probably was a call back. If there was a call back, I would say the call back was to say thank you for organising that. I spoke to him, and we're going in to meet the Governor of the Central Bank. Okay. But I don't recall, again, with certainty.
So the end result of the phone conversation between the two that you set up was a meeting with the Central Bank, as far as you're aware. That was...
I'm certain that was the end result, because that meeting then, we were made aware of that meeting subsequently as a board. Okay. As would have been proper.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that meeting took place when? Sorry, just remind me.
Well, I don't know, but I don't know the exact date, but I'm pretty sure it would have happened, pretty promptly after the call, in the days after Patrick's Day.
And just before I move on from this area of questioning, do you think that any of the contacts between yourself and Mr. Cowan, any of the contacts that you made or any of the contacts that you facilitated, resulted in any understanding at all in how the interests of the bank might be considered in a way that might have influenced Mr. Cowan's decision-making in the run-up to the guarantee or in the guarantee itself?
If you know Brian Cowan as well as I do, Brian Cowan is someone who you can give a view to on anything. And your view may be passionately expressed. But if Brian Cowan doesn't think it's the right thing, you've wasted your time. Because I think it's an important question in terms of not just his integrity, but I'm here to speak for myself, my own integrity. To presume, and I'm not saying that your question does make that presumption, but to presume for a moment that Brian Cowan would have been influenced to such an extent by me or by anybody else in respect of one bank and one bank's interests that he would take a decision or allow himself to be influenced in making a decision in a manner that was not in the interests of the people of Ireland and the state is, I think, for anyone who knows Brian Cowan and anyone of any political hue who knows him well would say, that's not Brian Cowan. Now, it is...
Stop the clock a second, and maybe, Mr. Drury, you might just give us an indication as to how many times you've met Mr. Cowan in the last 12 months.
In the last 12 months? Mm-hmm. Very, very irregularly. Partly, and I regret that, but partly because the truth is that we live in a very small country. We live in an environment where if I met Brian Cowan for a pint or we went to a match together, there is a percentage of people who would think we're up to no good. And so all of this palaver, to use an unfortunate term, has constrained the friendship in a way which is regrettable, but it is what it is. And I think it's to protect each other in a sense, because almost you can't win. If you meet him less often now than you would have done previously, then you're only meeting him because he was the minister or the Taoiseach. If you meet him less often now, then, as often now, then you're talking about the upcoming inquiry and you're cross-checking each other's notes and what happened. And there is an element, to be truthful, of you just can't win.
Okay, and just because Deputy Murphy was just moving on to wrap up with his questions, but you have quite categorically stated there your position with Mr. Cowan, how he would not be influenced by any information that was put before him. But were there discussions with you and Mr. Cowan about a pending guarantee?
I beg your pardon?
Was there discussions?
Absolutely not.
Okay, I just want to get that
Sorry,
clarified.
absolutely
Okay,
not.
thank you.
And if I may finish, Chairman, just the point that Deputy Murphy was asking me, I referenced, Brian Cowan. I also want to reference again Fintan Drury, because I am here to speak for myself.
Indeed.
And, I have a significant interest in politics. I have a great interest in the values that this state should espouse. And I would, under no circumstances, allow myself to be used in a manner whereby I would be trying to influence a minister or the Taoiseach of the day to do something which would be inappropriate or feathering my nest or other people's nests relative to his responsibilities.
Okay. Deputy, you've about 5 minutes left there.
Thank you, Chair.
Ask for clarification.
We can get, when you come round to your own questioning...
No, it's directly related to the question you asked Mr. Drury. How many times did he meet Mr. Cowan in the last year? We don't know. He didn't answer the question.
Well, I'm taking general that is casual.
Yeah, sorry, I thought I did answer the question, Senator, and
He just said just not as often as before.
Well,
We set it back to
He asked you how many times, and I was just
well,
asking.
I mean, I don't keep a running tab on how many people. I have lots of friends, and I don't keep a tab on how many times I've met them. I have had, different things going on in my life in the last couple of years, Senator, which mean that some friends that up to 2 years ago I would have seen very regularly, I have seen less frequently. So the point I was trying to make was that, rightly or wrongly, we made a decision as friends that we should see less of each other for fear that being seen together would be misunderstood or misrepresented.
Okay.
Thank you,
Clock is reset for you there, Deputy. Just under 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Drury. Let's move on to interaction with Dr. Nyberg for his report, because in his report, in paragraph 2.9.6, he says that the risk function in Anglo was inadequately resourced and did not have the conviction necessary to ensure compliance with credit policy. But I think in your opening statement you said that the risk function was well resourced. So
Was well resourced.
yeah, have you read the Nyberg report, and do you agree with that finding?
First of all, I said that in my opening statement, I said I believed that the risk function in Anglo was well resourced. I engaged fully with Dr. Nyberg. I found his approach very insightful, very fair, and very comprehensive. And I'm not, I think one of the things, there's probably only one significant finding in Nyberg that I would really take issue with. And I think, as I also said in my opening statement, Deputy, the truth is that whatever belief I had at the time that I was a director of Anglo-Irish Bank, some of those beliefs have been, if not shattered, they have been rendered inappropriate.
Okay. This also from Nyberg then. Most Anglo board members did not appear to have sufficient experience or specialist knowledge to fully recognise the specific risks attaching to a fast-growing monoline bank. Do you accept that finding?
I think with the final part of the sentence, and I'm not trying to be Jesuitical here, but I think with the final part of that sentence,
fast-growing monoline bank.
Yeah, I think that is correct. I don't think there were directors available in Ireland who had experience of a fast-growing monoline bank. And I'm not trying to be smart, but I do think that in other words, what I'm saying is that if you were to parse that sentence, I think the idea of directors not having sufficient experience is not reasonable or correct, but I think not having sufficient experience in order to be non-executive directors of a fast-growing monoline bank, I think that's a statement of fact, truthfully.
Okay, well then, moving into that in a bit more detail then, the monthly risk management reports at Anglo noted on a continuous basis that the bank was in excess of the financial regulator's single sector exposure limit, which is 200% of own funds. By July 2008, just when you came off the board, the exposure was at just under 600% of its own funds. Were you ever concerned about this breach in the limit over 200%? Was it something that was raised with you? Was it something that was discussed at the board?
It would have been discussed at risk, and the engagement would have been with the financial regulator. I unquestionably had faith in the risk management function and the risk management team. I think there were errors made, and rather than appear to be apportioning blame elsewhere, I think as chairman of the risk committee for that last year, and as a member of the risk committee for the previous 5 years, that I have to accept some of that responsibility. And what I mean by that is, for example, I think that the decision we made to merge the roles of Chief Risk Officer with that of the Finance Director was a mistake. And that's not a reflection, important to state, on the individual in question, quite the opposite. But it's in the principle when you look back, and I'm going to try and avoid saying that as too much, but the principle, at the time, the principle should have been wrong. We should have, as a board, we should have recognised that principle was not good, because the bank was at a scale where those two functions needed to be completely delineated.
Deputy, and then I move to wrapping things up. Deputy Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Drury. Just a few points for clarification, if I may.
Sure.
There was a loan review process by risk management in 2004. Do you remember that, or do you remember at least from the
I didn't remember it until I saw it.
Okay. And so in April 2004, Pat Whelan, who's the head of group risk, writes a memo in which he notes that development exposure has increased from the guideline limit of 15% of the total loan book to about 21%, and there's a need to agree a strategy to reduce the exposure. Was any strategy agreed to reduce the exposure, from your recollection?
I'm conscious of how the chairman has summarised some of my testimony. 2004 is 11 years ago. I saw the document 4 weeks ago. I'm prohibited from showing the document, sharing the contents of the document, quite correctly, with any third party. I cannot give you, and this may not serve my purposes well in terms of how I would be perceived by members of this committee or by the public. I cannot give you an honest or authoritative answer to that question. Okay.
So then following on from that, in terms of why the warning in the memo might have been ignored or not followed up on, can you recall? Because exposure to development only increased after that period, rather than decreased.
I understand that, and that, if you look at that, my view at that time was that that's a kind of almost like a point. 15 to 21% of the shift is not necessarily that significant, but it's actually just the start of a trend, if you like.
Can you explain why then? Why, given the warning in 2004? In fact, it's ignored. The warning's ignored, and the trend goes on as it has been warned about at that point in time.
No, I other than what I've already said, which is I do think that there was an acknowledgement, or there has to be an acknowledgement that the level of, that weighting between growth and control, which I've referred to, was not. The balance between those two things was not correct.
Okay. Another thing I wanted to clarify, just going back to the Drury's Glen outing, does the document building on achievement, does that ring a bell?
No.
In relation to the Drury's Glen outing?
No.
You don't recall that being a document that Alan Gray brought and was discussed?
I don't.
For brainstorming?
I don't.
Okay.
But I do recall him having an agenda and being kind of not surprised, but...
But agenda, not a document?
Yeah, no, I don't remember a document.
Okay.
No.
And then just to clarify, before you sat down for dinner, there wasn't a brainstorming session at that point?
No.
Okay. And just to remind me again, why exactly did Brian Cowan tell you that he'd spoken to Bertie Ahern after Sean Fitzpatrick had spoken to him?
After Sean, sorry.
Just follow.
A meeting.
Yeah, just to follow on from the evidence with Senator O'Keefe, is it not the case that you were aware that Brian Cowan had spoken to Bertie Ahern after the March 2008?
No, I'm sorry. Beg your pardon. But she didn't talk. May I correct what I may have, a false impression that may have been created? You asked me, Senator, I think, was I aware that Brian Cowan had gone and met
Yes.
Bertie Ahern?
Yes. And you said yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the truth.
And you said that Mr. Cowan had told you that.
Correct.
Yes, and he's just following up to know how.
Okay, but there was no discussion between. There was no link in my head between the phone interaction I had with Sean Fitzpatrick. I beg your pardon, with Brian Cowan about Sean Fitzpatrick needing to talk to him.
Brian Cowan had been
meeting Bertie Ahern.
Brian Cowan had been away.
Yeah,
Sean Fitzpatrick had informed him of the position. Brian Cowan got home, and the first thing he did was went to meet Bertie Ahern. And Brian Cowan told you about that meeting.
Correct.
Right. So why?
That was because of it was absolutely nothing to do with Anglo-Irish Bank or banking or liquidity crisis. Nothing to do with any of that.
Why did he tell you that?
Well, I mean, that's for Brian Cowan to. I mean, I know what the content of that conversation was, but it is absolutely no relevance whatsoever to the work of this committee. None. And I mean, I think if people look at events that happened thereafter,
yeah, sorry.
Well, I mean, I think I'm not talking about events in the financial.
Just wrap up now.
Just a final question then. At the point of your departure from the bank, were you aware of the serious problems it was facing in relation to liquidity? No. In relation to liquidity?
Yeah. I mean, but not specific or particular to Anglo. Would have been aware that liquidity. I mean, we had at board meetings, John Bull would come in at board meetings and give us updates on liquidity and on a regular basis over those period of months.
No concerns about the robustness of Anglo Bank or its model at that point, summer of 2008?
Okay.
Well, I mean, I think that not only did I not have no concerns about it, but I mean, and I do think in terms of my I'm conscious, Chairman, that people want to wrap up, but again, in the context of the summary that you gave of my testimony, I mean, in November 2008, which was 5 months after I had finished as a board director, a review was done of the Anglo loan book from top to bottom. And there was the view taken by the two directors who conducted that review, and which was independently verified by a firm of outside accountants, was that there was no requirement, that the bank was perfectly solvent.
Thank you. Thank you.